bridges across the Tidal River Thames. During the last year, I produced a 3-part video about the 35 bridges that cross the River Thames in London. A large portion of the River Thames is tidal. Tides rise and fall twice a day. Thames Tideway is the stretch of the River Thames downstream from Teddington Lock through the Pool of London, Thames Estuary, where it meets the waters of the North Sea. Across the longest, the greatest river in England, there are bridges linking north and south, east and west, bringing together a population of 9 million people in Greater London, which is the focus of this presentation. There are in total 35 bridges across the River Thames in London, from Hampton Court to Tower Bridge. Some of these bridges cross the Tidal River Thames, and here they are. Part 2 today is going to take us all the way from west to east, from Wandsworth Bridge all the way down to Vauxhall Bridge. Wandsworth Bridge was scheduled to complete in 1939. However, a shortage of steel in the build-up to the Second World War delayed its opening until September of 1940. The steel panels cladding the bridge were painted in shades of blue to camouflage it from German air raids, a colour scheme it remains today. Although it is one of London's busiest bridges, its drab colour scheme and minimalist design have led to it being described as probably the least noteworthy bridge in London. Before the current bridge, there was another bridge here at this location that was built in 1873. The bridge was narrow and too weak to carry buses, which became effectively a footbridge. A decision was made to demolish the bridge in 1937. Wandsworth Bridge is one of the busiest bridges across the River Thames in London, and it's now being currently repaired like most bridges from time to time. Whether they will keep the same colour or not is still unknown. But one thing is certain, a series of LED floodlights will be added underneath its arches. The next bridge is Battersea Railway Bridge, opened in 1863. On the north side of the River Thames bank, it's the area called Fulham. On the south bank is Battersea, and that is the heliport, very close to the south-west side of Battersea Railway Bridge. The bridge was also known as Cremorne Bridge, after the riverside public Cremorne Gardens in Chelsea. A foot and cycle bridge will be added to the arches of the bridge. The project is due to open next year, 2022. On the south side are 4 arches, 2 of which are used as storage for the residents of the houseboat community moored immediately downstream, and another one of which was opened to Thames Path pedestrian traffic. Next bridge, Battersea Bridge, opened in 1890. The bridge replaced a ferry service that operated here at this spot since Tudor times. The first Battersea Bridge was opened at this particular spot to pedestrians only in 1871, and eventually to traffic in 1872. Most artists in the late 19th century would come here to paint Battersea Bridge, and that is a painting by John Atkinson, painted in the 1880s, I believe. And here is another painting, this time by James Whistler, Brown and Silver, Old Battersea Bridge. Oil lamps were added to the deck in 1799, making Battersea Bridge the first Thames bridge to be lit. Around 1824, oil lamps were replaced by gas lighting. Battersea Bridge was demolished due to its poor condition in 1885. Joseph Bazalgette designed the bridge, which is the narrowest surviving bridge across the River Thames in London. If you're travelling on the river by boat, or if you're walking on the foreshore, you can clearly notice a symbol on both sides of the bridge, and that symbol reminds me of the Battersea Shield, which is one of the most significant pieces of Celtic art found in Britain. Made of bronze, covering of wooden, decorated in Latin style. It was found on the banks of the River Thames in this area. The object is on display in the British Museum, and it dates from 350 BC to 50 BC. There is a copy of the original in the Museum of London, which is this one you can see here on the right hand side. Whether this symbol was added to the bridge on purpose, I don't know, but it seems too much of a coincidence. Next bridge, Albert Bridge, opened in 1873. It's one of only 2 Thames Road bridges in central London, never to have been replaced. Toll booths remain there and are the only surviving examples of bridges' toll booths in London. Albert Bridge has been painted in different colours throughout the years. Currently it's painted in pink, blue and green, a colour scheme that is unusual for a bridge across the River Thames. But Albert Bridge is probably one of the prettiest bridges across the River Thames. It's worth mentioning that troops from the nearby Chelsea barracks used the bridge on a regular basis. The bridge had the tendency to vibrate as a consequence. Notices were placed warning troops to break steps, not to march in rhythm. These warning signs are still in place. The bridge was nicknamed as a consequence the Trembling Lady. And here are the signs, again, quite clearly visible for anyone to see when they walk past. Albert Bridge is illuminated by 4,000 LED, adding to its status as a landmark in London. It's worth mentioning that several films, quite famous films, were shot here, such as Clockwork Orange, Sliding Doors and Absolute Beginners with David Bowie. The architectural engineer Roland Mason Ordish, appointed to design Albert Bridge, was the same person who designed famous landmarks such as the Royal Albert Hall, St Pancras Railway Station and Crystal Palace. At the same time, work on the bridge was delayed by negotiations over the proposal of Chelsea Embankment. The bridge's design, however, could not be completed until the exact layout of the proposed Chelsea Embankment on the north bank of the River Thames. And here is a photo of Chelsea Embankment under construction in 1873. That's a Chelsea Embankment today on the north bank of the River Thames. While plans for the Chelsea Embankment were debated, Ordish, the engineer, built the Franz Joseph Bridge in Prague to the same design as that intended for the Albert Bridge. And here is the Franz Joseph Bridge in Prague in the year 1878. Our next bridge is Chelsea Bridge, sometimes confused with Battersea Bridge because it's right opposite the park, but on the north bank it's Chelsea and on the south bank it's the area of Battersea. This is the first self-anchored suspension bridge built in Britain, designed by Forrest and Wheeler and built by Holloway Brothers. Chelsea Bridge was opened by the first Minister of Canada, William King, who was in London at the time for the coronation of King George VI. King George VI's coronation took place the 12th of May of that year. Right before the World War II broke out, a temporary, sturdy structure bridge was built parallel to Chelsea Bridge. It's not known exactly where the bridge was built, but I believe it was built here at this stretch of the Thames, and I managed to find this photograph online. The bridge was capable of supporting tanks and other heavy equipment during World War II. The wartime Chelsea Bridge was eventually dismantled in 1945. The first ever Chelsea Bridge was opened in 1858 and initially named Victoria Bridge. The bridge was narrow and structurally unsound, leading the authorities to rename it Chelsea Bridge to avoid the royal family's association with a potential collapse. The first Chelsea Bridge was proposed about 20 years before it was actually built. That was part of a major development of marshlands on the south bank of the River Thames into the new Battersea Park, which is the part you see there on the right hand side on the south bank of the River Thames. And leading on to our next and final bridge of part 2 of this video is Grosvenor Railway Bridge. This bridge was originally known as Victoria Railway Bridge and eventually changed its name, I suppose for the same reason as the previous bridge we saw. It was opened in 1859 and widened in 3 stages afterwards in 1865, 1907 and 1960. The famous Battersea Power Station, which is nearby, was built between 1929 and 1935, and it's located right next to the bridge on the south bank of the River Thames. This iconic Grade II listed building has been redeveloped with flats, restaurants, shops, cultural spaces and a new tube station. It's a bridge of significant importance to London because it's the first railway bridge across the River Thames in central London, and possibly the busiest railway bridge in the world. Another interesting fact to mention is that this is the widest bridge on the River Thames.
Thank you. This is Battersea Power Station. Please exit using the back of the vessel. That's Battersea Power Station.
The name Grosvenor apparently comes from the landowners upon whose land the station was built. The family name can be traced back to Hugh Le Grand Veneur, a member of the Norman French family, who aided William the Conqueror. The name translates as the Master Huntsman.
And we are now approaching the last bridge of part 2 of this video, Vauxhall Bridge, opened in 1906.
Another bridge stood here with a name of Regent Bridge, perhaps because of the Prince Regent, the future King George IV. In the early 1800s, the bridge was eventually demolished in the late 19th century.
Quite recently, in 1993, 2 rolls of wooden posts were discovered in this area, and it's believed that they would have carried a deck. They were dated between 1550 BC to 300 BC. Although it might not have crossed the whole River Thames, as it might have been connected to an island, it is possible that this was the first ever crossing on the River Thames, much earlier than the first London Bridge. It was possibly used for burial of the dead in the island, as some Bronze Age spearheads were found alongside the remains of the wooden structure. The famous MI6 building at Vauxhall Cross houses the real-world headquarters of the British Secret Intelligence Services. It is located at number 85 Albert Embankment in Vauxhall, on the south bank of the River Thames, beside this bridge, Vauxhall Bridge. A total of 8 monumental statues, each weighing 2 tons, were installed on the upstream and downstream piers of this bridge,
exactly a year after it was first opened to the public, perhaps to commemorate the first anniversary of the bridge.
These 8 symbols symbolize agriculture, architecture, engineering, pottery, science, fine arts, local government, and education.